Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when the world wasn't just a place you lived in, but a living, breathing entity you lived with. Imagine a world so profoundly wild, so untamed, that every gust of wind through the trees felt like a whisper from an unseen presence, every babbling brook a conversation. You're trudging through ancient woodlands, the canopy so thick that only dappled light pierces the gloom, and honestly, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes without your smartphone's GPS, let alone a sturdy pair of waterproof boots. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on damp earth, the air cool and thick with the scent of pine needles, decaying leaves, and the rich, earthy perfume of moss. Around you, the forest stretches, seemingly without end, a vast, undulating sea of green and brown. This isn't your local park with manicured trails and conveniently placed benches. Oh no, this is the ancient Celtic world, a tapestry woven almost entirely of dense, primeval forests, mist-shrouded bogs, and roaring rivers. You hear the distant cry of a hawk, the scuttling of unseen creatures beneath the undergrowth, and, most prominently, the ceaseless, murmuring symphony of the trees. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch, isn't just a sound, it's a communication, it's a presence. For the ancient Celts, the world wasn't a collection of inert resources to be exploited, but a vibrant, interconnected web of life, pulsating with consciousness. Think about it. You wake up, not to the blare of an alarm clock, but to the chirping of birds outside your wattle and daub hut. You step out, and the ground beneath your bare feet is alive, cold, then warming with the sun, textured with roots and stones. The very air you breathe feels charged, not with city smog, but with the essence of growing things. You don't see nature. You are immersed in it, part of its very fabric. It's like living inside a giant, slow-breathing organism, where every pulse and tremor is felt deeply. Imagine trying to explain Wi-Fi to someone from this era. They'd probably think it was some kind of invisible tree spirit sending messages through the air. And in a way, they wouldn't be entirely wrong about the messages part. Their world was full of them if you knew how to listen. You spend your days navigating by the position of the sun filtered through the canopy, by the flow of rivers, by the way the wind whispers through different types of trees. Your very survival depends on an intimate understanding of this natural world. You know which berries are safe to eat, which roots have medicinal properties, where the wild game tends to graze. This isn't book knowledge. It's lived knowledge, passed down through generations, etched into your very being. The landscape itself was a character in their story, not just a backdrop. You walk through a valley, and the towering cliffs aren't just rocks. They're the ancient bones of the earth, holding untold stories. The mist that rolls in from the sea isn't just humidity. It's the breath of the land, carrying secrets from distant shores. You feel the dampness cling to your clothes, the chill seep into your bones, and rather than reaching for a remote to turn up the heating, you reach for another layer of wool or huddle closer to a crackling fire, drawing warmth from the very wood that once stood tall. This deep sensory engagement fostered a perception of the world that was fundamentally different from our own. For them, every natural feature, from a mighty mountain to a tiny spring, possessed a unique spirit or essence. It wasn't just a conceptual belief. It was a deeply felt experiential reality. You wouldn't just cross a river. You'd acknowledge the spirit of the river, perhaps offer a small token of respect before stepping into its currents. You wouldn't just fell a tree. You'd feel its life, its presence, and perhaps offer an apology or a prayer for its sacrifice. It was a world of constant negotiation, of give and take, with the seen and unseen forces that permeated their existence. Consider the sheer scale of the forests that dominated much of ancient Europe. Mainstream historical fact tells us that vast swathes of the continent, particularly the regions inhabited by Celtic peoples, were covered in dense, old-growth forests that would dwarf anything we see today outside of a few protected reserves. You could walk for days, even weeks, without emerging from the shadow of the trees. This omnipresent forest wasn't just scenery. It was their home, their provider, their protector, and at times, their terrifying adversary. It was a labyrinth of life, where every path led deeper into its mysteries. And within this verdant labyrinth, you learned to read the subtle signs. A particular pattern of moss on a tree trunk might indicate the direction of the prevailing wind or the presence of a hidden water source. The way the light filtered through the leaves at dawn could tell you the time of year or signal a change in the weather. It was a constant dialogue with the environment, a language spoken not in words, but in sensations and observations. You were an active participant in this conversation, always listening, always interpreting. There's a quirky tidbit about this deep connection. Some archaeological findings suggest that certain Celtic settlements were deliberately aligned with natural features like prominent rock formations or ancient trees, almost as if the landscape itself dictated the very layout of their communities. It wasn't just about practical defensive positions. It was about living in harmony with the spirits of the land. You wouldn't just build a house anywhere. You'd find a place where the energy felt right, where the land welcomed you. It's a bit like picking a spot for your tent at a campsite based on vibes, but with far higher stakes and actual consequences if you got it wrong. This profound integration with nature meant that the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual were incredibly permeable. There wasn't a strict division between earthly and divine. The divine was in the earthly. The spirit wasn't somewhere far off in the heavens. It was right there, in the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, in the rushing waters of a waterfall, in the very air you breathed. You didn't need to go to a temple built by human hands to find the sacred. You simply needed to step outside and open your senses. Historians still argue whether this perception was a literal belief in individual spirits inhabiting every rock and tree, or a more generalized sense of a pervasive life force, an animating principle that flowed through all of existence. But for you, living in that time, the distinction probably felt academic. What mattered was the feeling, the undeniable sense of presence. When the wind howled through the branches, it wasn't just air moving. It was the voice of the forest, speaking to you, sometimes gently, sometimes with a raw, primal power that made the hairs on your arms stand on end. You learned to recognize the individual personalities of different places. The whispering glade where the light is always soft and the air feels calm. The roaring rapids where the water churns with untamed energy. The ancient, silent grove where the trees stand like watchful elders, their branches interwoven into a dense, protective canopy. Each place has its own mood, its own story, its own particular way of making its presence known. And you, as a Celt, are attuned to these nuances, responding to them not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. This isn't just about survival. It's about belonging. You are not a visitor in this world. You are an integral part of it. Your life is cyclical, mirroring the seasons, the growth and decay of the plants around you. You plant your crops when the earth awakens, you harvest when it yields its bounty, and you draw inwards when the cold grips the land. You see your own life reflected in the life cycle of the trees. The tender shoots of spring, the robust growth of summer, the letting go of autumn, and the quiet endurance of winter, waiting for renewal. So, as you walk through this ancient landscape, you're not just seeing trees and rivers and hills. You're experiencing a world that is alive, sentient, and constantly communicating. Every rustle of leaves, every babbling brook, every gust of wind, it truly whispers of presence. And this deep, intuitive understanding of a living world, particularly the pervasive presence within the trees, laid the foundation for so much of what the Celts believed and practiced. It was the very air they breathed, the very ground they walked upon, infused with spirit and ancient wisdom. Imagine, if you will, peeling back the layers of our modern, often disconnected world, and stepping into a time when the very air hummed with unseen presences. You're not just walking through a forest. You're walking through a grand, living cathedral where every rustle of leaves, every babbling brook, every steadfast stone holds a secret, a spirit, a consciousness. For the ancient Celts, their world wasn't just alive in the biological sense. It was animated. This wasn't some quaint poetic notion. but the foundational worldview known as animism, where life and consciousness pulsed through all natural elements, especially and most profoundly through trees. Think of it this way. For us, a rock is a rock. It's inert, a geological formation. For the Celts, that rock could be a sleeping giant, a watchful guardian, or even a hardened ancestor. The river wasn't just water flowing to the sea. It was a living entity, with its own moods and temperament, perhaps a benevolent deity providing sustenance, or a fickle spirit demanding respect. You wouldn't just dip your bucket in for water. You might offer a small token, whisper a thank you, or even ask permission. It's like talking to your houseplant, but, with actual, tangible consequences if you don't show proper respect. And probably less judgment from your neighbors. This wasn't just a belief system. It was the very fabric of their reality. Every mountain peak had its spirit, every spring its guardian. The wind wasn't just air in motion. It was a messenger, a breath of the unseen. Even the sun and moon weren't merely celestial bodies. They were divine beings with their own wills and influence over the earthly realm. This holistic view meant that humanity was not separate from nature, but deeply, intricately interwoven within it. You weren't a master of the land. You were simply one of its many inhabitants, albeit one with a knack for building cool hill forts and crafting intricate jewelry. Now, within this grand tapestry of animated existence, trees held a particularly potent and revered position. Why trees, you ask? Well, for starters, consider their sheer longevity. You see an ancient oak, gnarled and vast, and you're looking at something that has stood for centuries, perhaps even a millennium. It has witnessed countless seasons, generations of humans, and the rise and fall of civilizations. If wisdom is gained through experience, then these arboreal elders were veritable libraries of knowledge, silent witnesses to history unfolding. It's like that one really old relative who's seen it all, but instead of telling slightly embellished stories about the good old days, the tree just is, and you listen, or at least the Celts did. You'd observe how a tree seemingly died in winter, shedding its leaves, only to burst forth with vibrant new life in spring. This cycle of apparent death and rebirth was a powerful symbol of eternity and transformation, mirroring the Celtic understanding of life and the afterlife. A tree literally reaches for the heavens with its branches, while its roots delve deep into the earth, connecting it to the underworld. It was seen as an axis mundi, a cosmic pillar connecting all realms of existence: the sky, the earth, and the mysterious depths beneath. This profound connection to all three planes made them natural conduits for spirits, a kind of interdimensional telephone line, if you will, but with better reception and no monthly bill. Moreover, the practical reliance on trees was immense, fostering an even deeper respect. Trees provided shelter, fuel for warmth and cooking, wood for tools, weapons, and chariots. Their fruits and nuts offered sustenance. Their bark and leaves were used for medicine and dyes. You didn't just take from a tree, you entered into a reciprocal relationship. To cut down a tree without proper reverence or a perceived spiritual justification would be akin to harming a living, conscious being, a profound transgression. This isn't just a don't litter rule. It's a don't dismember your neighbor rule, applied to the natural world. This fundamental animistic belief, that spirits resided within and animated all natural elements, was a mainstream historical fact across many indigenous cultures worldwide, and the Celts were no exception. It wasn't just a fringe belief held by a few eccentrics. It was the accepted paradigm. You were expected to interact with the world as if it were teeming with conscious entities, some benevolent, some mischievous, some utterly indifferent. It shaped their rituals, their daily practices, and their very understanding of their place in the cosmos. A quirky tidbit, perhaps, but indicative of this deep animistic connection. Some Celtic traditions suggested that certain trees, particularly those with unusual growths or twisted branches, were especially potent, acting as homes for particularly powerful or ancient spirits. These fairy trees or hag trees were often left undisturbed, even if they grew in inconvenient locations, out of respect or perhaps a healthy dose of fear for the entities residing within. Imagine trying to build a new road and having to reroute it because a particularly grumpy spirit lived in a gnarled old hawthorn. Modern urban planning would have a fit. Now, Historians still argue whether Celtic animism was a direct worship of the spirit within the tree, or if the tree was simply seen as a potent manifestation or dwelling place of a more abstract deity. Was it the oak itself that was divine, or was it a chosen vessel for a powerful god of thunder and strength? The answer likely lies in a nuanced blend of both, depending on the specific context and the individual's interpretation. But regardless of the exact theological parsing, the profound reverence and belief in the consciousness of these natural entities remains steadfast. You understand now, don't you? It wasn't about abstract concepts. It was about lived experience. You felt the chill of the river spirit as you waded in, heard the whispers of the wind spirits carrying messages, and sensed the ancient wisdom radiating from the heart of a grand old tree. There was no such thing as empty space. Every nook and cranny of their world was alive, imbued with spirit and demanding respect. It truly was a world where you might casually greet a particularly impressive boulder on your morning walk, or apologize to the grass you just stepped on. And honestly, it sounds a little bit more polite than our modern world, doesn't it? This foundational animistic worldview, where consciousness permeated everything, set the stage for the Celts' unique and profound relationship with trees. It wasn't just a matter of practical utility, but a deep spiritual resonance with beings they considered ancient, wise, and very much alive. You find yourself drifting back, a gentle current carrying you further into the green heart of ancient Celtic lands. The air around you, even now, feels thick with the scent of damp earth and verdant leaves, a symphony of chlorophyll and decay. If you were truly there, you wouldn't just hear the whisper of the trees. You'd feel their omnipresent weight in every aspect of your daily life. Because before you could even think about spirits or wisdom, you had to survive. And for the ancient Celts, survival was, quite literally, rooted in the trees. Imagine waking up in a simple roundhouse, its walls woven from willow or hazel branches, plastered with mud and thatch. The roof above you, a snug cap of reeds and straw, supported by sturdy timber beams. You're not just sleeping near trees, you're sleeping inside them, or at least inside their meticulously crafted essence. Every morning, as the first rays of sun filter through the smoke hole, you'd be reminded of this fundamental truth. Your home, your very protection from the elements, from the biting winds of winter to the relentless summer sun, was a gift from the forest. It wasn't a choice to live among trees. It was the only way to live. Think about the sheer practicalities. You need a fire to cook your morning porridge, a fire to keep the chill at bay, a fire to smoke your meats and preserve your food. What do you burn? Wood, of course. You'd spend countless hours foraging for fallen branches, meticulously splitting logs with a bronze axe, stacking them just so, ensuring a dry supply for the long, damp months ahead. This wasn't just a chore. It was a ritual of survival, a constant engagement with the forest's bounty. And let's be honest, who doesn't love the crackle and warmth of a good log fire? Though, I bet they didn't have to deal with the annual "is this wood dry enough?" debate that still plagues modern camping trips. Some things, it seems, never change. But it wasn't just about hearth and home. Look around your imagined Celtic village. What do you see? Fences woven from pliable hazel, corralling livestock. Tools fashioned from sturdy ash or oak, the handles of your plows, the shafts of your spears, the very mallets you use to drive in stakes. Your bowls and spoons, perhaps carved from sycamore or alder. Even your carts, those clunky but essential vehicles for transport, relied on wheels and frames painstakingly crafted from durable timber. You couldn't just pop down to the nearest Celtic hardware store for a new shovel. Everything had to be sourced, shaped, and maintained by hand, relying almost entirely on the arboreal offerings around you. It's enough to make you appreciate your modern-day Amazon Prime delivery, isn't it? Though I doubt the Celts had to worry about package theft from their front porch. Beyond the obvious, trees were also a source of sustenance in ways you might not immediately consider. Nuts, for example, were a crucial part of the Celtic diet. Hazelnuts, walnuts, acorns, painstakingly gathered, processed, and stored for the lean winter months. Acorns, while bitter, could be leached of their tannins and ground into flour, providing a vital source of carbohydrates. You might even find yourself chewing on the sweet inner bark of certain trees, like birch, for a quick energy boost, or tapping maple and birch trees for their sugary sap in the spring, much like we do today. It's a bit like an ancient, all-natural energy drink, only without the neon colors and questionable ingredients list. And then there was the medicine cabinet, which, for the Celts, was often found hanging from the branches of the forest. The bark of willow trees, for instance, contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin, used to alleviate pain and fever. You'd learn which leaves could staunch a wound, which berries were safe to eat, and which could bring on a stomachache you'd regret for days. This deep, practical knowledge wasn't just passed down. It was lived. Every scrape, every cough, every ache became a lesson in the medicinal properties of the trees around you. It made you incredibly self-reliant, which is good, because there wasn't exactly a Celtic urgent care on every corner. This profound reliance fostered a relationship that went far beyond mere utility. It cultivated a deep-seated respect, an almost reverential gratitude. You didn't just take from the forest. You understood that your very existence depended on its continued generosity. You would have witnessed the slow, patient growth of a mighty oak, knowing that the timber it would yield in 100 years might build your grandchild's home. You'd see the delicate cycle of a birch, shedding its leaves in autumn, only to burst forth with new life in spring, a constant promise of renewal. This wasn't abstract philosophy. It was the tangible reality of your world. Historians still argue whether the Celts practiced widespread coppicing and pollarding, specific methods of tree management that involve cutting trees back periodically to encourage new growth for timber, fodder, and fuel. While there's evidence for these practices in later periods, the extent to which early Celts systematically managed their forests for sustainable yield is a subject of ongoing debate among archaeologists and dendrochronologists. However, the sheer volume of wood required for their settlements, fortifications, and daily lives strongly suggests that they were not simply clear-cutting but likely had some form of practical, sustainable relationship with their wooded environment. You don't devastate the very thing that keeps you alive, do you? Unless, of course, you're a modern-day corporation, but that's a story for another bedtime. Consider the role of trees in animal husbandry. Leaves and young shoots from certain trees, like ash and elm, would have been used as fodder for livestock, especially during harsh winters when other forage was scarce. Your sheep and cattle might graze in woodlands, benefiting from the shelter and the diverse plant life. The forest wasn't just a source of building materials. It was an extension of your farm, a natural larder and shelter for your precious animals. This integrated approach meant that the health of the forest was directly tied to the health of your community. It's easy for us, in our highly industrialized world, to overlook the sheer ingenuity and intimate knowledge required to live so closely with nature. But for the Celts, it was second nature. They knew which trees burned hottest, which wood was best for tool handles, which bark could be used for tanning hides, and which branches were flexible enough for weaving baskets. This comprehensive, lived experience of the forest meant that trees weren't just objects. They were collaborators in survival. They were providers, protectors, and silent witnesses to generations of human life. And this brings us to a quirky little tidbit. Did you know that certain Celtic bog bodies, incredibly preserved by the anaerobic conditions of peat bogs, sometimes show evidence of having been wrapped in tree bark or placed on beds of specific tree branches before burial? While the exact purpose is debated, was it for preservation, ritual, or simply convenience? It underscores the pervasive presence of trees even in their final rites. Imagine, even in death, the trees were still offering shelter. It's a very literal interpretation of going back to nature, isn't it? So, before we even whisper about the spiritual, the mythological, or the sacred, remember this profound, inescapable truth. The ancient Celts lived, breathed, and survived because of trees. Their homes, their tools, their food, their medicine, their warmth, all stemmed from the forest. This isn't just about respect. It's about an unbreakable, tangible bond forged in the crucible of daily necessity. And it is from this deep, practical reliance that their profound spiritual connection truly blossomed. You don't revere something you don't profoundly depend on, do you? Not truly. The Celts depended on trees for everything, and in return, They gave them their hearts, their minds, and their enduring gratitude. You find yourself standing on the edge of a dense, ancient forest. The air here is different, isn't it? Cooler, perhaps, and thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and something else, an almost electric stillness. This isn't just any woodland you're entering. You're approaching what the ancient Celts called a nemeton. Forget grand temples carved from stone, or towering cathedrals with stained glass windows. For the Celts, the most sacred places weren't built by human hands at all. They were found, nurtured, and revered in the heart of nature itself. Imagine, if you will, that you're gently pushing aside a curtain of low-hanging branches, stepping over gnarled roots that snake across the forest floor like the veins of an ancient being. The light immediately softens, dappling through the canopy above in shifting patterns, painting the ground in mosaic shades of emerald and gold. The sounds of the outside world, the distant calls of birds or the rustle of the wind, seem to muffle, as if the very air inside this grove is thicker, more resonant. It's like stepping into a soundproofed room, but instead of silence, you hear the quiet hum of life, of breath, of ancient presence. This is no ordinary walk in the park. It's more like visiting your very wise, very old, and slightly intimidating gray-tant's house, where you just know there are stories in every creak of the floorboards. And let's be honest, finding these places before GPS was invented must have been a real quest. Just head towards the really big, glowy tree, they'd say. You can't miss it. These nemetons, derived from the Celtic word for sacred grove, weren't just random patches of trees. They were carefully chosen, often naturally occurring clearings or especially dense stands of ancient trees, frequently near a spring, river, or other natural water source. They were the very heart of Celtic spiritual life, places where the veil between their world and the other world felt thinnest, where the presence of deities and spirits was most palpable. You don't need a fancy altar when the whole forest is your church, do you? And certainly, no one was going to complain about the overgrown hedges. No homeowners association rules in a nemeton, thank goodness. As you move deeper, you notice the trees themselves. These aren't just any trees. They are the arboreal giants, their trunks wide and furrowed with centuries of growth, their branches reaching skyward like supplicating arms. You might feel a gentle pull, an almost magnetic draw towards a particularly ancient oak, its bark a map of time, or a towering ash, its roots seemingly plunging to the very core of the earth. The Celts believed these magnificent, long-lived trees weren't just passive observers but active participants in the spiritual landscape. They were seen as living conduits, antennae reaching into the heavens and roots anchoring into the underworld, connecting all realms. This deep connection made them perfect places for profound spiritual experiences. Within these sacred groves, the Celts would perform rituals, make offerings, and seek guidance. Think of it less as a structured ceremony with pews and hymnals, and more as an immersive, experiential communion. You might see offerings left at the base of a particularly venerated tree, perhaps a beautifully crafted piece of jewelry, a weapon, or even simple agricultural produce, placed as a gesture of gratitude or a plea for divine favor. The most well-known archaeological discoveries of Celtic ritual sites, often interpreted as nemetons, frequently reveal evidence of votive offerings, sometimes including weapons or animal remains, carefully placed in specific areas, suggesting highly organized ritual practices within these natural settings. It wasn't just a casual drop-off. It was a deliberate, respectful exchange. Historians still debate the extent to which these groves were entirely natural versus carefully managed or even partially planted by human hands. While they certainly embrace the wildness of nature, there's evidence that certain areas might have been cleared, specific trees encouraged, or pathways subtly maintained to enhance their sacred function. It wouldn't be surprising if they did a bit of spiritual landscaping, would it? Like tidying up your meditation corner, but on a grander, more ancient scale. The atmosphere in a nemeton was one of profound reverence and sometimes a little bit of healthy fear. You wouldn't go prancing through a nemeton like it was your backyard. These were powerful places, charged with spiritual energy. It was here that people came to connect with the divine, to ask for healing, to seek prophecies, or to simply meditate and feel the presence of the spirits that dwelled within the trees and the land itself. Some fringe beliefs even suggested that certain exceptionally ancient trees within a Nemeton were not just symbolic but literally served as temporary portals to the otherworld, allowing spirits to pass through or even for the Druids to journey there in trance states. Imagine trying to explain that to your local planning committee. The trees themselves were the central figures. An ancient oak might be seen as embodying a powerful deity, its massive presence radiating wisdom and strength. A cluster of birches might signify new beginnings and purity, a place for cleansing rituals. The very age of these trees lent them an unparalleled authority. They had stood through countless seasons, witnessed generations of humans, and held within their very being the collective memory of the land. They were the ultimate listeners, long before therapists were a thing, silently absorbing the hopes, fears, and prayers of countless souls. So, as you stand in this imagined Nemeton, feel the cool bark beneath your fingertips, listen to the gentle rustle of leaves that sounds almost like hushed voices, and breathe in the deep, earthy scent. You are not just in a forest. You are in a living, breathing sanctuary. You are in a place where the ancient Celts found their gods not in idols of stone, but in the towering majesty of a tree, in the whisper of the wind through its branches, and in the profound, sacred silence of the grove itself. It was a place where their connection to nature wasn't just admired, but deeply, truly lived. As you drift deeper into the forest of ancient Celtic beliefs, you arrive at a clearing, bathed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Here, you encounter the figures who stood at the very heart of Celtic spiritual life, the Druids. Forget what you think you know from historical dramas. These weren't just guys in robes with impressive beards, though many probably did have impressive beards. You're talking about the intellectual and spiritual powerhouses of their society, the ones who truly, deeply understood the language of the trees. Imagine, if you will, a time before Google, before libraries, before even a single written word for most knowledge. How would you store the wisdom of generations? How would you understand the world around you, predict the seasons, heal the sick, or settle disputes? You'd need a class of incredibly bright, dedicated individuals, wouldn't you? That my sleepy friend was the Druid. They were the judges, the teachers, the astronomers, the philosophers, and the healers, all rolled into one highly revered, occasionally intimidating package. It's like if your favorite podcast host, your wise old grandaunt, and your most intimidating professor all merged into one super being. And they didn't even have coffee to get them through their incredibly long days. Their pivotal role in interpreting the wisdom of trees wasn't just some quaint hobby. It was the very cornerstone of their understanding of the cosmos. For the Druids, trees weren't merely botanical specimens. They were living libraries, ancient record keepers, and direct conduits to the divine. You see, if you subscribe to an animistic worldview, where spirits whisper from every rock and ripple in the stream, then the largest, longest-lived, and most majestic beings in your environment, the trees, would naturally be seen as having the most profound connection to that spiritual realm. It just makes sense, doesn't it? Like, if you were picking a spiritual guide from your backyard, you'd probably go for the ancient oak over, say, a particularly philosophical dandelion. No offense to dandelions, but they just don't have the same gravitas. So, how did they commune with trees? It wasn't a casual chat over a cup of herbal tea, though I'm sure they had plenty of those. This was a profound, immersive practice. You would spend hours, days, perhaps even weeks, observing a single tree. You'd notice the subtle shift in its leaves as the seasons turned, the way its branches reached for the sun, the intricate patterns of its bark, the creatures that made their homes within its boughs. You'd listen to the rustle of its leaves, the creak of its branches in the wind, sounds that, to the Druid, were not just natural phenomena but the very voice of the tree, speaking secrets to those who knew how to listen. It was like tuning into a frequency that most people simply couldn't hear, like being able to understand what your dog is really thinking when it stares at a piece of cheese. This wasn't just passive observation, mind you. It often involved deep meditation, quiet contemplation, and a complete immersion in the tree's presence. Imagine sitting beneath the vast canopy of an ancient oak, feeling its roots anchor deep into the earth, its branches reaching for the sky. You'd feel the subtle vibrations, the slow, steady pulse of life, It's a bit like forest bathing, but with a spiritual PhD attached. The Druids believed that the trees, especially the ancient ones, held collective memories, echoes of past events, and insights into future possibilities. They were, in essence, living oracles. Uncovering this wisdom was a complex art. It involved interpreting omens from the way mistletoe grew on an oak, the direction a branch fell, or even the patterns of light and shadow cast by the leaves. They studied the healing properties of bark, leaves, and berries, understanding that the physical vitality of the tree mirrored its spiritual strength. This practical knowledge was intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. If a tree could heal the body, surely it could also soothe the spirit or reveal hidden truths. They understood the interconnectedness of all things long before modern science started using fancy terms for it. Mainstream historical fact alert. It's well documented by Roman sources, most notably Julius Caesar in his Commentarii de Bello Gallico, that Druids held immense authority in Celtic society. They were not just priests, but also served as judges, arbitrating disputes, and were responsible for the education of the youth, often requiring decades of memorization of vast amounts of oral tradition. Imagine having to learn everything without a single textbook, just by listening and repeating. Your brain would be a supercomputer by the end of it, or you'd just be really, really good at charades. The Druids' training was incredibly rigorous, often lasting up to 20 years. During this time, they committed vast quantities of knowledge to memory, including laws, histories, genealogies, astronomies, and, of course, the intricate lore of trees. This oral tradition was paramount. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. The Druids famously refused to commit their sacred knowledge to writing, believing that doing so would weaken the memory, discourage diligent study, and make their profound wisdom too accessible to the uninitiated. It was their intellectual property, locked away in their minds, a secret garden of knowledge no one could steal. It also makes historians pull their hair out because, no notes. Thanks, guys. This reliance on oral tradition is a big reason why so much about the Druids remains shrouded in mystery, leading to quite a bit of academic head-scratching. Historians still argue whether the Druids formed a unified, centralized priesthood across all Celtic lands, or if their practices and beliefs varied significantly from tribe to tribe and region to region. Was there a Druid High Council? Or was it more like a loose affiliation of very smart, tree-loving individuals? We may never know for sure, which frankly adds to their mystique, doesn't it? It's like trying to figure out if all the world's cat owners have a secret society or if they just independently decided that cats are superior. So, when you consider the Druids, you're not just thinking about a religious class. You're envisioning the very intellectual backbone of Celtic society, a group whose profound connection to trees wasn't just spiritual, but practical, philosophical, and deeply integrated into every aspect of life. They were the guardians of wisdom, and much of that wisdom was rooted, quite literally, in the ancient forests they called home. They taught their people to see trees not as mute resources, but as venerable beings, living repositories of spirit and wisdom, whispering truths to those patient enough to listen. And perhaps, as you listen to the gentle hum of your own home, you might just hear a whisper too. You stand now, perhaps on a gentle rise, the air cool and crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. Before you, a colossal form dominates the horizon, its silhouette a testament to the passage of untold centuries. This, my friend, is the mighty oak, the undisputed monarch of the Celtic forest, and the very heart of their arboreal beliefs. You don't just see it, you feel its presence, a deep, resonant hum that seems to emanate from its very core. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer, unyielding strength of this tree. Its trunk, gnarled and fissured, is wider than you are tall. Its bark a tapestry of deep furrows that tell a story of countless seasons, of sun-drenched summers and fierce winter gales. You reach out, your fingers tracing the rough, textured surface, feeling the silent power held within. This isn't just wood. It's a living monument, a titan that has stood sentinel while generations of Celts lived, loved, and eventually returned to the earth it sprang from. Its branches, thick as lesser tree trunks, spread outwards like the arms of a benevolent giant, forming a vast canopy that filters the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. It's the kind of tree you could get lost looking at, a testament to slow, deliberate growth. Honestly, if you think about it, the oak is the ultimate procrastinator. Takes its sweet time, but boy, does it deliver on the grandeur. For the ancient Celts, the oak was far more than just a large tree. It was a living embodiment of strength, resilience, and enduring wisdom. Its roots plunged deep into the earth, anchoring it firmly against any storm, mirroring the steadfastness they admired in their own communities. Its longevity was legendary. An oak could easily outlive 10 human lifespans, witnessing the ebb and flow of history with quiet indifference. This made it a natural symbol of eternity, a bridge between the transient world of mortals and the enduring spirit realm. They saw in its deep roots a connection to the underworld, a grounding force, while its soaring branches reached towards the heavens, bridging the divine and the earthly. You can almost hear the soft, ancient whisper of its leaves, a murmur of secrets gathered over centuries. This profound connection wasn't merely symbolic. It was central to their spiritual practices. The oak was the chosen tree for the most powerful rituals, especially those conducted by the revered Druids. These wise individuals, the spiritual leaders, judges, and educators of Celtic society, held the oak in unparalleled esteem. Many scholars believe that the very word Druid might even derive from a Celtic word meaning knower of the oak or oak seer, though historians still debate the precise etymology and its implications for their practices. But one thing is clear. If you were a Druid, the oak was your office, your library, and your sanctuary all rolled into one. You wouldn't find them in a stuffy lecture hall. They were out there, communing with the true masters of wisdom. The sacred groves, known as nematons, were often dominated by venerable oaks. These weren't just random clusters of trees. They were meticulously chosen sites, often naturally occurring clearings within dense oak forests, where the veil between worlds felt thinnest. Here, under the watchful gaze of these arboreal giants, the Druids would perform their most solemn rites. Think about it. No fancy cathedrals, no stained glass windows, just the raw, breathing majesty of nature. It's like having a spiritual spa day, but instead of cucumber water, you've got the scent of damp earth and the rustle of leaves as your soundtrack. One of the most well-known and often romanticized mainstream historical facts concerning Druids and oaks comes from the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, who described a specific Druidic ritual involving the cutting of mistletoe from an oak tree with a golden sickle. While the details of this account are debated, it certainly highlights the oak's central role in Druidic religious practices and its association with sacred plants like mistletoe, which was believed to possess immense healing and spiritual properties. Imagine the scene. The Druids, clad in white, ascending the mighty oak, the golden sickle glinting in the dawn light, carefully harvesting the parasitic plant that clung to the revered host. It sounds like something straight out of a fantasy novel, doesn't it? Except, for the Celts, it was their reality, their profound connection to the divine. The oak's connection to the divine extended beyond just ritual spaces. It was often associated with powerful Celtic deities, particularly those connected with thunder, lightning, and the sky, like Tyrannes, whose name itself means thunderer. Oaks, being tall and majestic, were naturally more prone to lightning strikes, leading the Celts to interpret these strikes not as destruction, but as direct communications from the gods. A lightning-struck oak was not ruined. It was consecrated, touched by divine fire. This quirky tidbit highlights how their observations of nature directly fed into their spiritual beliefs. It's like the gods were sending them a very dramatic, very loud text message, and the oak was the celestial phone tower. Beyond its physical attributes and ritual significance, the oak was also seen as a fount of wisdom. Its deep roots were thought to access the ancient knowledge of the earth, while its expansive canopy was believed to gather insight from the heavens. Druids would spend countless hours beneath their boughs, meditating, studying, and seeking guidance. They believed that the oak's slow, deliberate growth imparted a unique kind of wisdom, one that valued patience, steadfastness, and a deep understanding of natural cycles. If you wanted advice that truly stood the test of time, you didn't go to a self-help guru. You went to an oak. It had seen it all, probably even the first ever awkward family photo. The oak also played a vital role in Celtic daily life, reinforcing its sacred status. Its hard, durable wood was essential for building homes, making tools, crafting weapons, and even constructing chariots, the very backbone of their society. Acorns, the oak's fruit, were a valuable food source for livestock, particularly pigs, and could also be processed for human consumption in times of scarcity. The practical utility fostered a deep respect, elevating the oak from a mere resource to a cherished benefactor, a provider that sustained life. When you rely on something so completely for your survival, it's only natural to imbue it with spiritual significance. It's like your Wi-Fi router, utterly essential, and you probably say a silent prayer to it when it's working well. The reverence for the oak permeated every layer of Celtic society, from the simplest farmer to the highest-ranking druid. It was a constant presence, a symbol of stability in a world that could often be turbulent. To cut down an oak unnecessarily was considered a grave offense, an act of sacrilege against nature and the divine. These trees were not just part of the landscape. They were part of the family, ancient ancestors whose silent presence guided and protected. So, as you step away from the imagined majesty of the ancient oak, you carry with you a sense of its profound significance. It wasn't just a tree. It was a living deity, a source of unparalleled strength, wisdom, and a direct conduit to the divine. Its deep roots anchored the Celts to their land, while its soaring branches connected them to the cosmos, embodying their fundamental belief that the natural world was alive, conscious, and deeply sacred. The oak, in its quiet, enduring glory, remains one of the most powerful symbols of the Celtic connection to nature. You find yourself standing at the edge of a clearing, the air crisp, the ground still damp from an early spring shower. Overhead, the trees are just beginning to unfurl their tiny, hopeful leaves. But one tree, more than any other, seems to shimmer with an almost ethereal glow: the birch. Its bark, a luminous, almost pearlescent white, peels in delicate, papery strips, like old parchment whispering secrets to the breeze. It's a stark contrast to the gnarled, ancient oak we just left behind, isn't it? While the oak exuded ancient gravitas, the birch feels lighter, younger, almost like a mischievous sprite just stretching awake. Imagine, for a moment, being an ancient Celt, emerging from the long, dark grip of winter. The world around you is slowly reawakening, and among the first to announce this rebirth is the birch. Its slender branches, often swaying with a graceful flexibility, are among the earliest to green, pushing forth those vibrant, almost translucent leaves that catch the sunlight. This isn't just a pretty sight, it's a profound signal. To a people whose very survival depended on the rhythms of nature, the birch was a living, breathing promise of renewal. It was the tree that said, "Hey, everyone, good news! Spring's actually happening this year. You can stop hoarding those last few turnips now." This immediate, visible association with the turning of the seasons, with the end of scarcity and the return of warmth, cemented the birch's place as a powerful symbol of new beginnings and fresh starts. It's not just its early blooming that gave the birch this reputation. Think about its bark. That striking white, often tinged with silver, evokes a sense of purity and cleanliness. It's almost as if the tree itself has just had a good scrub. And indeed, the Celts, with their deeply ingrained animistic worldview, saw this purity reflected in the tree's very essence. Birch was often associated with cleansing rituals, with washing away the old and welcoming the new. You might find its branches used in purification ceremonies, perhaps gently brushed over a person or a space to symbolically sweep away negativity or illness. It was like nature's own spiritual dustpan and brush, ready to tidy up your soul. This idea of cleansing wasn't just symbolic. It had practical applications too. The Celts were incredibly resourceful, and the birch offered a bounty of uses. Birch sap, for instance, was collected in early spring, a process that sounds a bit like tapping a tree for its very essence, doesn't it? This sap wasn't just a refreshing drink. It was also believed to have powerful cleansing and detoxifying properties. Imagine sipping on this slightly sweet, clear liquid, feeling it invigorate your body after a long winter, and believing it was literally washing away the sluggishness and impurities within you. It's like the ancient world's first spring detox smoothie, only probably less expensive and definitely more authentic. Beyond the sap, the birch's bark itself was incredibly versatile. You could peel it in thin, waterproof layers, using it for everything from writing surfaces, yes, a kind of ancient paper, to making lightweight containers for gathering berries or transporting water. The wood, though not as sturdy as oak, was flexible and strong enough for crafting tools, arrow shafts, and even parts of dwellings. The Celts were masters of working with what nature provided, and the birch, with its adaptable nature, was a true gift. This constant interaction, this reliance on the birch for so many practical needs, only deepened their respect and understanding of its inherent qualities. Now, let's talk about protection. The birch was also widely believed to be a powerful protector. Its association with purity and light made it an excellent ward against malevolent spirits and negative energies. You might find a small birch branch hung above a doorway, or even woven into the thatch of a roof, acting as a silent sentinel, guarding the home and its inhabitants. Think of it as the ancient Celtic equivalent of a beware of dog sign, but for mischievous fae and grumpy ghosts. This belief in its protective qualities extended to the vulnerable, particularly newborns. It was not uncommon for cradles to be made from birch wood, imbuing the sleeping infant with the tree's qualities of purity, new beginnings, and, crucially, protection from harm. The idea was that the very essence of the birch would safeguard the tiny, innocent life within. This protective aspect also tied into the idea of fresh starts. If you were embarking on a new journey, a new venture, or simply wanted to clear out the lingering bad luck from a previous endeavor, the birch was your go-to tree. Its branches, often tied into a bundle, were used as a besom or broom, not just for sweeping physical dirt, but for ritually sweeping away old energies, making space for new, positive ones. It's the ultimate out with the old, in with the new tool. You can almost hear the ancient Celts saying, "Right, let's sweep away that bad harvest luck and start fresh with the birch." A mainstream historical fact that underscores the birch's significance is its widespread use in the Beltane fire festivals. Beltane, celebrated around May 1st, marked the true beginning of summer and was a time of purification and fertility. Birch branches were often incorporated into the great bonfires, their quick burning would contributing to the cleansing flames. People and livestock would pass between two such fires, a ritual believed to purify them and protect them from disease and misfortune for the coming year. This wasn't just about a good bonfire. It was about harnessing the very essence of renewal and protection that the birch embodied, using its energy to bless the community for the fertile months ahead. And for a quirky, fringe tidbit, some Celtic folklore suggests that the birch was particularly favored by a type of benevolent fae known as the Birch Lady or Lady of the Woods, who would occasionally appear near birch groves, offering guidance or healing to those who showed respect for the trees. She wasn't a powerful goddess, but more of a gentle, localized spirit, almost like a kindly neighborhood watch for the forest. You wouldn't find her demanding sacrifices, just maybe asking you to pick up your litter and appreciate the beauty around you. There's some academic back and forth about the precise hierarchy of sacred trees within Celtic society. While the oak clearly held a dominant position for its strength and wisdom, historians still argue whether the birch's role as a symbol of new beginnings and purity was considered equally fundamental, albeit in a different sphere of influence, or if it was seen as more of a practical, everyday sacred tree. Was it the wise elder or the hopeful youth of the forest pantheon? Perhaps it was a bit of both, fulfilling different but equally vital spiritual and practical needs. So, as you imagine the ancient Celts moving through their world, you see how the birch wasn't just a tree. It was a living embodiment of hope. It was the whisper of spring after a harsh winter, the promise of a clean slate, the gentle guardian against unseen threats. Its peeling bark, often used to write upon, was like the very pages of nature's calendar, marking the turning of the year and the endless cycle of death and rebirth. Its presence reminded them that even after the darkest times, new life would always burst forth, pure and unblemished, ready for a fresh start. And really, isn't that a beautiful thought to drift off to? You drift a little deeper now, your internal compass spinning gently, guiding you towards another arboreal giant that held immense sway in the Celtic world, the ash. As you approach, you notice its distinctive silhouette, often tall and straight, with a crown of leaves that rustles with a drier, more insistent whisper than the rustle of an oak. Its bark, a pale gray, is furrowed with deep, vertical fissures, like ancient lines etched by time itself. There's an undeniable sense of purpose about the ash, a quiet strength that seems to thrum beneath its surface, beckoning you closer. In the Celtic worldview, the ash wasn't just another tree. It was often seen as a cosmic pillar, a living axis around which the very fabric of existence revolved. Imagine, if you will, the ancient Celts looking up at a particularly towering ash, its highest branches seemingly tickling the clouds, its roots delving deep into the earth, disappearing into the dark, mysterious realms below. It's easy to see how such a majestic presence could be perceived as a literal bridge, connecting the celestial heavens, the earthly realm where you stand, and the shadowy underworld. It was, in essence, the original multi-story car park of the cosmos, but instead of cars, it ferried spirits and divine messages between planes. You can almost hear the soft whoosh as a spirit takes the express elevator from the underworld, up through the trunk, and out into the sunlit canopy. While the famous Norse Yggdrasil, the world tree, is perhaps the most well-known iteration of this concept, the Celts, too, held a similar profound belief in a central cosmic tree. Whether the Celts had a single, universally recognized world tree concept akin to Norse Yggdrasil, or if it was a more localized, symbolic understanding tied to specific sacred ash groves, is a point of ongoing scholarly discussion. But the underlying principle was the same: a sacred tree that served as the backbone of creation, a conduit for spiritual energy, and a place where the veil between worlds was exceptionally thin. It was the ultimate spiritual Wi-Fi hotspot, always connected, always transmitting. You could almost feel the cosmic data streaming through its branches. Beyond its mythical role as a cosmic anchor, the ash tree was also a vital component in the practical, everyday lives of the Celts, particularly when it came to healing. They were remarkably observant, these ancient folk, noticing the subtle properties of every plant around them, and the ash was no exception. Its leaves, for instance, were believed to possess potent healing qualities. You can imagine a Celtic healer, perhaps a wise druid or a village elder, carefully plucking fresh ash leaves, their edges slightly serrated, and crushing them into a poultice. This green, pulpy paste would then be applied to wounds, cuts, or even swellings, acting as a natural antiseptic and anti-inflammatory. It was like their ancient version of a first aid kit, only instead of sterile wipes and bandages, you had fresh leaves and a prayer. For internal ailments, infusions made from ash bark or leaves were common. Picture the steaming concoction, perhaps bitter but undoubtedly effective, brewed to alleviate fevers, soothe aches, or aid digestion. The bark, rich in various compounds, was particularly valued for its purported ability to reduce pain and inflammation. It was their natural pharmacy, albeit one where the pharmacist was a tree and the prescription was a whispered incantation. There's even a fascinating, somewhat quirky folk belief that persisted for centuries, suggesting that ash trees could repel snakes. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder, who was certainly no Celt but whose writings often reflected widespread ancient beliefs, even mentioned this property of the ash, claiming that snakes would actively avoid its shade. So, if you ever found yourself in ancient Gaul needing to avoid a slithery encounter, you knew where to set up your picnic blanket. Just don't tell the snakes it's only a belief. But the ash's utility didn't stop at medicine. Its wood, renowned for its incredible strength, flexibility, and elasticity, made it the material of choice for crafting tools of power. Think about it. When you're relying on your tools for survival, whether for hunting, farming, or battle, you need something that won't snap or shatter under pressure. Ash would fit the bill perfectly. This is a mainstream historical fact. Ash was widely used across Europe for centuries for items requiring resilience and shock absorption. You can almost feel the smooth, sturdy grip of an ash-handled axe in your hand, or the satisfying weight of an ash spear, perfectly balanced, ready for the hunt. It was the carbon fiber of the ancient world, but, organic and with a soul. Spears and javelins, essential for hunting and warfare, were frequently fashioned from ash. Its straight grain and inherent toughness meant that a well-crafted ash spear could penetrate formidable hides or armor. Imagine a Celtic warrior, his muscles rippling, launching an ash spear with incredible force, the wood flexing just enough to absorb the shock, then springing back, propelling the weapon with deadly accuracy. Even the shafts of bows, while yew was perhaps more famous, were sometimes made from ash for its resilience. It was the ultimate ancient DIY material, perfect for everything from a sturdy fence post to a weapon that could defend your village. Beyond weapons, ash was indispensable for everyday tools. Handles for axes, hammers, scythes, and other agricultural implements were almost exclusively made from ash because of its ability to withstand constant impact and vibration without splintering. You're not going to get carpal tunnel from an ash-handled shovel, that's for sure. This practical reliance on ash for the very tools that sustained their lives only deepened the Celts' respect and reverence for the tree. It wasn't just wood. It was a living extension of their own strength and ingenuity. And then, of course, there were the ritual objects. Druidic staffs, wands, and other implements used in ceremonies or for divination were frequently carved from ash. The Celts believed that the inherent power and wisdom of the tree itself were imbued into these objects. When a druid held an ash staff, it wasn't just a piece of wood. It was a conduit, a direct line to the cosmic energies that the ash represented. It was like holding the literal backbone of the universe in your hand, ready to channel its ancient power. You could practically feel the ancient wisdom humming through it, perhaps even giving you a slight tingle in your fingertips. So, as you step back from the venerable ash, you carry with you a deeper understanding of its profound significance. It was a tree of paradoxes, both an ethereal cosmic axis, connecting realms beyond human comprehension, and a down-to-earth, practical resource, providing healing and the very tools necessary for survival. It was a testament to the Celtic belief that the sacred and the mundane were never truly separate, but intertwined, like the roots and branches of the mighty ash itself. Its strength, its resilience, and its connection to the vastness of the cosmos made it a truly revered member of the Celtic arboreal pantheon. You trudge deeper now, past the vibrant greens and sturdy browns of the forest, towards a darker, more ancient presence. The air grows still, perhaps a touch cooler, as if the very breath of time has slowed. And there it stands, or rather, they stand, the yew trees. Not the sprightly young things you might see in a park, but the truly ancient ones, their trunks gnarled and twisted, looking less like trees and more like living sculptures carved by millennia of wind and rain. You run your hand over the deeply fissured bark, feeling the incredible texture of age, a silent testament to centuries, sometimes even thousands of years, endured. The yew, my friend, is not a tree you merely observe. It's a tree you feel. It carries an aura, a heavy, contemplative silence that seems to absorb all sound. You might even find yourself lowering your voice out of an instinctual respect for its profound antiquity. If the oak was the king, the yew was the wise elder, the silent witness to countless generations. It's the tree that whispers secrets only the very old can know, assuming trees could actually whisper secrets, which, given their general lack of vocal cords, they probably can't. But you get the vibe, right? For the ancient Celts, the yew was a profound paradox, a living embodiment of the cycle of existence. It was, and still is, a tree deeply associated with death. You've probably noticed them, haven't you, in old churchyards? Those dark, brooding sentinels standing guard over graves? This isn't a coincidence, nor is it purely a Christian tradition. The Celts held this association long before crosses dotted the landscape. The very essence of the yew is imbued with this connection. Its needles, its bark, even its beautiful, bright red berries. Oh, but especially those berries, looking so inviting, are highly toxic. A potent poison lurks within, capable of bringing life to a swift, silent end. This inherent lethality was not lost on the Celts. They understood that a tree so intimately linked with the cessation of life must also hold a powerful key to its mysteries. It was a guardian of the threshold, a silent keeper of the passage from one state of being to another. But here's where the paradox deepens. where the yew truly earns its stripes as a symbol of transformation and eternity. Despite its association with death, the yew is also a symbol of incredible, almost unbelievable longevity. These trees can live for thousands of years. We're talking about living organisms that were saplings when the pyramids were being built, that watched empires rise and fall, that have stood rooted while human history unfolded around them like a fast-forwarded film. You look at one of these ancient giants, and you can't help but feel a humbling sense of your own fleeting existence. It's like looking at your great-great-great-grandparent, if your great-great-great-grandparent also happened to be a tree and had been around since the Bronze Age. Pretty wild, huh? This extraordinary lifespan, combined with its evergreen nature, its ability to retain its dark, rich foliage even through the harshest winters, made the yew a powerful symbol of eternal life, of rebirth, and of the cyclical nature of existence. Death, for the Celts, was not an end but a transformation, a journey. The yew, standing stoic and green amidst the barrenness of winter, embodied this enduring spirit. It suggested that even in the face of apparent death, life persists, renews, and continues in another form. It was a beacon of hope wrapped in the solemnity of farewell. This duality is why you so often find ancient yews in burial sites, both pre-Christian and Christian. They weren't just planted there as morbid decorations. They were seen as living links between worlds, their deep roots reaching down into the underworld, their branches stretching up towards the heavens. They were believed to protect the spirits of the departed, to guide them on their journey, and even to hold their essence within their ancient wood. Imagine the comfort, the quiet solace, of believing that your loved one's spirits were watched over by these venerable, eternal guardians. It's certainly more comforting than, say, a plastic garden gnome with a fishing rod. A quirky, almost magical, aspect of the yew that reinforces this idea of rebirth is its unique ability to regenerate. An old yew can literally split apart, its branches falling to the ground, and then those branches can reroot and grow new trunks, creating a circle of new life around the ancient, decaying core. Sometimes the original trunk might even hollow out completely, becoming a living tunnel, while the outer layers continue to thrive. It's like the tree itself is constantly undergoing a process of death and resurrection, a living demonstration of its profound symbolism. You might wonder if they ever get tired of the whole rebirth thing, like, oh, another new trunk? Can't I just have a lion? Now, speaking of its practical uses, while the yew's toxicity made it dangerous, its wood was incredibly valuable. It's dense, flexible, and exceptionally strong. This strength made it the preferred wood for crafting weapons, most notably the legendary English longbow. This is a mainstream historical fact that often surprises people when they first hear it. The very trees associated with death and the spiritual realm also provided the material for some of the most formidable weapons of the medieval period. This again highlights the Celtic understanding of duality, a single entity holding both life and death, spiritual power and practical might. It's like finding out your quiet, contemplative yoga instructor is also a world champion powerlifter. Historians still argue whether the presence of yew trees in ancient sacred sites, long before formal burial grounds existed, indicated a pre-existing reverence for their spiritual properties, or if their placement was purely practical due to their longevity and hardiness. Was it a conscious spiritual choice, or did their sheer resilience simply make them the longest-lasting markers in a landscape? Perhaps, as with many things Celtic, it was a beautiful blend of both. You'd probably lean towards the spiritual, wouldn't you? It just feels right. So, as you step away from the ancient yew, you carry with you a new understanding of its profound place in the Celtic worldview. It was more than just a tree. It was a living myth, a tangible link to the mysteries of existence. It taught them that life and death are not opposites but two sides of the same coin, constantly transforming, constantly renewing. And in its dark, enduring presence, you can still feel the echoes of that ancient wisdom, a quiet reminder that even in the deepest shadows, there is the promise of eternal green. As you settle deeper into your imaginary, moss-covered armchair, perhaps with a soft blanket pulled up to your chin, let's drift even further into the whispering forests of the ancient Celtic imagination. We've already explored how they saw trees as living, breathing entities, but now, Prepare to truly unpack the leafy archives of their myths. For the Celts, trees weren't just backdrops to their sagas. They were often the very heartwood of the story, entwined with the fates of deities, heroes, and even entire communities. It's like watching a really old, really long fantasy series where the main characters keep having dramatic encounters with particularly sentient shrubbery. Imagine, if you will, the great pantheon of Celtic gods and goddesses, not just lounging on cloud thrones, but often found leaning against a gnarly oak or emerging from the shimmering leaves of a hazel grove. Take, for instance, the legendary Dagda, often called the good god, though, not necessarily good in the modern sense, more like good at everything. He was a father figure, a chieftain, and a master of magic, and his most prized possession? His harp, youth. Now, this wasn't just any harp. It was made of ancient oak. It was so powerful it could command the seasons, make men laugh or cry, and even lull warriors to sleep or stir them to battle. When it was stolen by the Fomorians, those rather unpleasant sea giants, Dagda, along with Luff and Ogham, tracked it to a desolate, abandoned fort. But where was the harp found? Hung on the wall of a great oak naturally. As Dagda called to it, the oak harp flew into his hand, and he played tunes that chased the Fomorians away, weeping. It's a wonderful image, isn't it? A divine instrument, crafted from the very essence of a sacred tree, holding such immense power. It makes you wonder if your own guitar would sound better if it had a bit more oaky magic in its strings. Historians still argue whether the specific type of oak used for such instruments was chosen for its acoustic properties or purely its symbolic power. But either way, the connection was profound. Then there's the humble hazel tree, often overlooked in favor of its mightier cousins, but absolutely central to tales of wisdom and poetic inspiration. You see, the Celts had a thing for knowledge, especially the kind that came from unexpected sources. Picture the Well of Sagai's, or the Well of Wisdom, a mythical source of all knowledge, from which flowed the river Boyne. Around this well grew 9 hazel trees, and their nuts, plump with ancient wisdom, would drop into the water. These nuts were then eaten by the salmon of knowledge, who, as you might guess, became incredibly wise. Now, a certain hero named Finn Mac Cumhale, Finn MacCool, if you prefer the anglicized version and don't fancy twisting your tongue, was destined to gain this wisdom. While cooking the salmon for a wise druid, Finn accidentally burned his thumb, and, being a sensible lad, instinctively put it in his mouth. In that tiny, searing moment, he ingested the very essence of the salmon's wisdom, which, of course, came from the hazel nuts. From then on, whenever Finn needed a burst of insight, he just had to bite his thumb. It's a rather convenient superpower, isn't it? Much less messy than, say, wrestling a dragon for a scroll. This quirky tidbit of a hero gaining immense knowledge from a chain of events starting with a nut falling into a well really highlights how every element of nature, no matter how small, could be imbued with potent magical significance. But the myths weren't always about grand gods and epic quests. Sometimes they were deeply personal about the very origins of people or places. Many Celtic clans believed they descended from a specific tree, seeing their lineage as rooted in its ancient wood, their family tree quite literally a tree. You might hear tales of a hero born from an oak, or a queen whose spirit resided in a willow. These weren't just metaphors. They were deeply held beliefs that connected them to the land and to something much older than themselves. It's a bit like having a family crest, but instead of a lion or a shield, it's a particularly sturdy elm, and you occasionally go give it a hug and whisper about your day. Consider the ash tree, a towering presence often associated with the concept of a world tree in many Indo-European mythologies, though its Celtic interpretation had its own unique flavor. While not as explicitly detailed as the Norse Yggdrasil, the ash in Celtic lore was often seen as a cosmic axis, connecting the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Its wood was highly prized for spears and staves, imbued with a protective and often magical quality. Imagine a warrior entering battle with a spear crafted from ash, believing it carried the strength of the cosmos within its grain. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a conduit, or a druid, holding an ash staff, using it to channel energies or ward off malevolent spirits. The ash was also deeply tied to healing, its leaves and bark used in ancient remedies, reinforcing its role as a tree of life and vitality, a sturdy backbone in a world full of shifting shadows. And then there's the hawthorn. Oh, the hawthorn. This little tree, with its sharp thorns and delicate blossoms, holds a particularly ambivalent place in Celtic mythology. It's deeply sacred, often marking the entrance to the otherworld, the realm of the Sidhe or the Fae folk. You see, the Fae loved hawthorn trees, especially those standing alone in a field. Disturbing one was, and still is in some rural areas, an absolute no-no. Cut down a lone hawthorn? You're practically inviting mischievous spirits, or worse, the wrath of the Sidhe, right into your living room. It's like leaving your front door wide open with a sign that says, "Please come in and rearrange my furniture while I sleep." There are countless folk tales of people who, despite warnings, dared to fell a hawthorn and suffered misfortune, illness, or even disappearance. So, if you ever find yourself wandering through the Irish countryside and spot a solitary hawthorn, perhaps just give it a respectful nod and keep walking. No need to poke the Fae bear, or, in this case, the Fae tree. The yew tree, ancient and often found in sacred burial grounds, also features prominently. Its incredible longevity, with some specimens living for thousands of years, made it a potent symbol of eternity, death, and rebirth. Myths often link the yew to the passage between worlds. It was believed to guard the spirits of the dead and serve as a gateway to the otherworld. Imagine a druid performing a solemn ritual beneath the gnarled, shadowy branches of an ancient yew, seeking communion with ancestors or guiding a soul to its next journey. Its dark berries, though beautiful, are poisonous, adding to its mystique as a tree of both life and death, transformation and enduring memory. It's the ultimate goth tree, really brooding and beautiful, with a hidden, lethal edge. These are just a few glimpses into the vast tapestry of Celtic myths where trees aren't just props, but active participants, sacred vessels, and wise old beings. From the Dagda's oak harp that commanded the very fabric of reality to Finn McCool's hazelnut-induced wisdom, trees were woven into the very narrative of their existence. They were the silent witnesses to history, the living libraries of ancestral memory, and the powerful conduits to the divine. Their roots ran deep not just into the earth, but into the very soul of Celtic belief, proving that sometimes the greatest stories are found not in dusty books, but in the rustling leaves of an ancient grove. You've wandered through the whisper-soft groves, felt the ancient wisdom radiating from the mighty oak, and even imagined the Druids communing with the very spirit of the forest. Now, as the soft glow of twilight paints the sky in hues of lavender and deep indigo, settle in for a truly intriguing secret, one etched not just into the landscape, but into the very fabric of Celtic communication itself. Imagine, if you will, an alphabet, but not one you'd scrawl on a piece of parchment with a quill. No, this one is different. This one breathes with the life of the forest. We're talking about Ogham, and just saying the word Ogham feels like a secret, doesn't it? It slips off the tongue like a soft current in a hidden stream. Picture this: you're standing before an ancient stone, perhaps a boundary marker or a memorial. Your fingers trace lines, a series of notches and strokes carved along its edge, sometimes straight, sometimes angled, sometimes crossing. It looks almost like a primitive barcode, doesn't it? Or perhaps a cryptic message left by an ancient alien civilization, if you're feeling particularly whimsical. But these aren't just random scratches. Oh no, these are letters. And each one, my dear listener, is a tree. Yes, you heard that right. Not a for apple, but a for elm, the pine tree, representing clarity and perspective. Not B for ball, but B for baith, the birch tree, symbolizing new beginnings and cleansing. It's like the Celts decided, why use boring old squiggles when we can literally embody the forest in our writing? It's a rather elegant solution, if you ask me, and certainly more poetic than texting LOL in Latin. Though imagine trying to send a quick message in Ogham. Your thumbs would be buff from carving. The Ogham alphabet, a truly unique system of writing, consists of 20 primary characters, or feta, each represented by a specific number of strokes or notches carved across or beside a central stem line. This stem line was often the natural edge of a stone pillar, a wooden staff, or even the corner of a building. It's a linear, almost minimalist form of expression, yet profoundly rich in its associations. This makes it distinct from other ancient European scripts like Latin or Greek, which relied on more complex, standalone letter shapes. In fact, a mainstream historical fact about Ogham is that the vast majority of surviving Ogham inscriptions are found on standing stones in Ireland and Western Britain, primarily dating from the 4th to the 7th centuries AD, serving as names or short memorial messages. You can almost feel the cool, rough stone beneath your fingertips as you imagine deciphering these ancient marks. Can't you? Now, why create such a unique, tree-infused alphabet? This is where the plot thickens, and where the whispers of scholarly debate begin to echo through the academic groves. Historians still argue whether Ogham was primarily developed as a secret language to be used by the Celts, specifically the Druids, to communicate without the Romans' understanding, or if it was more of a mnemonic device, a way to remember complex knowledge by associating it with the deeply symbolic trees. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a convenient way to keep records that were both practical and imbued with spiritual significance. Imagine the Druids, sitting around a crackling fire, perhaps on a chilly autumn night, using these tree letters to pass down their sacred lore, their voices hushed, the knowledge protected by the very trees it represented. It's a wonderfully conspiratorial thought, isn't it? Like an ancient, mystical password for the coolest secret society. The connection to trees for each letter wasn't arbitrary. It was deeply rooted in the Celtic worldview, where each tree held specific qualities, myths, and energies. So, when a Druid carved an Ogham inscription, they weren't just writing a sound. They were invoking the spirit and essence of that particular tree. Imagine carving the Ogham for alder, fern, and knowing you were calling upon its protective and prophetic qualities. Or perhaps marking a boundary with the Ogham for hawthorn, youth, to ward off negativity and bring fertility. It's not just writing. It's a form of active magic, a way to infuse an object or message with arboreal power. This brings us to the fascinating use of Ogham for divination. You see, the Celts, especially the Druids, were deeply attuned to the natural world for signs and omens. It's not a huge leap to imagine them using Ogham as a tool for foresight. Picture a Druid, perhaps blindfolded, reaching into a bag filled with small, smooth pieces of wood, each one carved with an Ogham letter. As they draw a stick, the tree associated with that Ogham provides the answer, the guidance, or the prophecy. If they draw the Ogham for you, Idad, it might speak of endings and new beginnings, or the wisdom of ancestors. If it's the oak, Dur, it could signify strength, stability, or enduring truth. It's like a forest-themed fortune cookie, but with a lot more gravitas and considerably less sugar. This practice wasn't just about predicting the future. It was about understanding the present by connecting with the deep, symbolic language of the trees. The idea of Ogham as a form of secret communication is particularly captivating. In a world where the Roman Empire was expanding, bringing its own language and script, having a unique, visually distinct alphabet that could be easily carved onto natural materials like wood, which, unlike stone, decays over time, leaving fewer traces for modern archaeologists to find, would have been incredibly valuable. It allowed for messages to be passed, rituals to be recorded, and knowledge to be preserved within the Celtic sphere, away from prying foreign eyes. It's like having your own secret handshake, but instead of hands, you're using sticks and stones. And let's be honest, it's far more impressive than whispering pineapple as a code word. One quirky or fringe tidbit about Ogham, adding to its mystique, is the theory that it may have been developed as a finger alphabet or a system that could be communicated non-verbally, perhaps by touching the fingers to the nose or along the shins, with each finger or position representing a different Ogham letter. Imagine a silent, subtle conversation happening right in front of you, disguised as a casual scratch or adjustment of clothing. It makes you wonder what ancient secrets might have been passed in plain sight, doesn't it? Like a very advanced game of charades, but with spiritual consequences. The beauty of Ogham, beyond its practical uses for inscription or its potential for divination, lies in its profound encapsulation of the Celtic respect for trees. It wasn't just a utilitarian tool, it was a spiritual one. Every time a Celt used Ogham, they were not just writing, they were engaging with the very essence of the forest. They were reinforcing the belief that trees weren't just wood and leaves, but living entities brimming with spirit, wisdom, and the power to communicate. It tells you something about a people when their very alphabet is a love letter to nature. It's a reminder that their world was deeply intertwined with the natural environment, where every rustle of leaves, every sturdy trunk, and every delicate branch held a piece of a larger, profound story. And through Ogham, they wrote that story, one tree letter at a time, whispering their secrets across the ages. You're nestled deep in the ancient Celtic lands, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, a whisper of unseen things rustling through the leaves. As twilight stretches its long, shadowy fingers across the landscape, you can almost hear the forest breathing around you. It's a beautiful, wild, and sometimes, let's be honest, a little bit spooky world. You've got no streetlights, no alarm systems, and certainly no Wi-Fi to distract you from the creaks and groans of the night. So, how do you keep the boogeyman, or perhaps more accurately, the mischievous spirits, malevolent entities, and general bad vibes, from knocking on your wattle and daub door? Well, if you were an ancient Celt, you didn't call a security company. You called upon a tree. Yes, you heard that right. It wasn't just about putting up a sturdy fence. It was about cultivating a living, breathing sentinel. The belief that trees acted as powerful guardians and protectors against negative energies was deeply ingrained in the Celtic worldview, a testament to their profound connection with the natural world. These weren't just pretty pieces of foliage. They were active participants in the spiritual defense of hearth and home, village and person. Imagine, if you will, the ultimate low-maintenance security system. You plant it, you respect it, and it quietly does its job, probably for centuries, without ever needing a battery change or a software update. Honestly, it makes those smart doorbells look a bit high-strung, doesn't it? As you wander through a reconstructed Celtic village, you'd notice certain trees strategically placed. The most celebrated protective tree, the undisputed champion of warding off unwelcome spiritual guests, was often the rowan or mountain ash. With its vibrant red berries, it was seen as a potent symbol of life and vitality, and its wood was believed to possess an inherent power to repel malevolent enchantment and dark magic. You'd find rowan trees planted near homes, at the entrance to settlements, and even in burial grounds, acting as a spiritual barrier. You might even spot a small rowan branch hung above a doorway or a cow byre, a simple yet profound charm against ill-wishing and the dreaded evil eye. It was like the ancient equivalent of putting up a no solicitors sign, but for spirits who hadn't quite grasped the concept of personal space. Now, while the rowan was the headliner, other trees played crucial supporting roles in this arboreal security detail. Take the hawthorn, for instance. Oh, the hawthorn. This one's a bit of a trickster, isn't it? While often associated with the fae folk and sometimes seen as a gateway to the otherworld, its formidable thorns also made it a natural protector. You might find it planted as a hedge, not just to keep out stray livestock, but to form an impassable barrier for less corporeal intruders. The very prickliness, the sharp, unyielding nature of its branches, was thought to deter anything with ill intent. It's like the tree itself was saying, "Come closer if you dare, but you might regret it." It's a subtle flex, but an effective one. Then there's the holly, especially significant during the darkest days of winter. Its evergreen leaves, sharp and unyielding, and its bright red berries, mirroring the rowan's protective hue, made it a powerful symbol of endurance and resilience against the encroaching darkness. You might find branches of holly brought into homes during the winter solstice, not just for festive cheer, though they probably enjoyed that too, but to cleanse the space and ward off any lingering negative energies that might try to creep in during the long nights. It was a tangible connection to life and light when the world outside seemed to be dying, a steadfast guardian against the chill of both winter and malevolent spirits. And let's not forget the juniper. Its aromatic smoke, when burned, was widely used in purification rituals, cleansing spaces and people of negative influences. You can almost smell the sweet, resinous scent now, drifting through the air, carrying away whatever spiritual dust bunnies might have accumulated. This wasn't just about making the place smell nice. It was an active spiritual fumigation, ensuring that the environment was inhospitable to anything harmful. It's a bit like ancient air freshener, but with significantly more spiritual punch. So why trees? Why this profound trust in their protective powers? Well, consider their nature. Trees are deeply rooted, literally and figuratively, in the earth. Their ancient forms have witnessed countless seasons, generations, and perhaps countless spiritual skirmishes. They stand tall, connecting the underworld, the earthly realm, and the heavens. This deep connection to all three planes of existence made them ideal conduits for channeling benevolent energies and deflecting malevolent ones. They were seen as stable, wise, and enduring beings, capable of absorbing, neutralizing, or simply standing firm against forces that might overwhelm a mere mortal. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Celts, like many ancient cultures, viewed the natural world as imbued with spiritual essence, and trees, with their immense presence and longevity, were particularly potent in this regard. The protection offered by trees wasn't always passive. Sometimes it involved active engagement. Charms were often made from the wood of protective trees, carved with symbols or imbued with intent. Offerings might be made at the base of a particularly significant tree, reinforcing its guardianship and showing respect for its spirit. It was a reciprocal relationship. You honored the tree, and the tree, in turn, offered its protective embrace. You wouldn't just plant a rowan and forget about it. You'd acknowledge its presence, perhaps even whisper a thank you now and then. Archaeologists puzzle over the exact purpose of some ancient tree placements and carvings, and historians still debate whether these were purely practical defenses, deeply spiritual rites, or, as is most likely, an intricate blend of both. A quirky tidbit: some Celtic folklore suggests that specific trees could even act as personal guardians, forming a bond with an individual. If you were born under the sign of a particular tree in the Ogham alphabet, which we'll get to later, don't you worry. That tree might be considered your personal protector, offering guidance and shielding you from harm throughout your life. It's like having a spiritual bodyguard, but one who prefers photosynthesis to bicep curls. Imagine having a mighty oak looking out for you. Not much is getting past that. So, as you drift deeper into this understanding, you begin to see the Celtic landscape not just as a collection of plants, but as a vibrant, interconnected web of life and spirit, where every tree had a role to play. Some offered sustenance, some offered wisdom, and many offered protection. They were the silent sentinels, the stalwart guardians, standing firm against the unseen tides of energy, ensuring that life, both physical and spiritual, could flourish under their watchful branches. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? To know that even in the deepest wilderness, you had allies rooted firmly in the earth, whispering ancient promises of safety. Now, as you gently settle deeper into your imaginary moss-covered armchair, let's drift into one of the most poignant and truly beautiful aspects of the ancient Celtic connection to trees: the profound belief that these silent, towering sentinels were not just living beings, but also living links to the ancestors. Imagine, if you will, the rustle of leaves above you, not just the wind, but perhaps the soft whisper of generations past, a gentle sigh from the very roots of your heritage. For the Celts, the past wasn't a dusty history book or a distant, sepia-toned photograph. It was a living, breathing presence, woven into the fabric of the land itself. And nowhere was this more evident than in the ancient trees that dotted their landscape. You see, when you consider the lifespan of an oak or a yew, stretching for centuries, perhaps even millennia, it becomes easy to understand why they might be perceived as enduring witnesses to countless human lives. While you might scroll through a genealogy app to find your great-great-great-grandparents, the Celts simply looked to the grand old tree at the edge of the village, knowing it had seen countless generations come and go, its roots entwined with the very earth where their forebears rested. It was, in a very real sense, the original family tree, long before anyone thought to draw one on paper. The sheer longevity of these arboreal giants meant they had seen more than any human ever could. They stood through triumphs and tragedies, through births and deaths, through changing seasons and shifting human fortunes. They were the silent, steadfast observers of entire family lines. This deep-seated observation naturally led to the belief that the trees absorbed, in some mystical way, the essence, the memories, and even the spirits of those who lived and died beneath their branches. Think of it like a giant, organic hard drive, constantly recording the history of the community. Though I imagine it would be a bit slow for streaming your favorite shows. It wasn't just a poetic notion. It was a foundational element of their worldview. For a society that placed immense value on lineage and oral tradition. Indeed, a mainstream historical fact about the Celts is their reliance on oral histories and bardic traditions to pass down knowledge, laws, and genealogies. It makes perfect sense that their deepest connections to the past would be embodied in something as tangible and enduring as a tree. When a revered elder passed, their wisdom, their stories, their very spirit were not simply gone. They were believed to transition, in part, into the sacred landscape, often finding a new kind of residence within the ancient trees. You might walk through a hallowed grove, your bare feet sinking into the soft earth, and feel a profound sense of continuity. The gnarled roots reaching deep into the soil were not just anchoring the tree. They were symbolically, and perhaps literally, reaching into the resting places of ancestors. The branches reaching skyward were like outstretched arms, connecting the earthly realm with the spirit world. It created a powerful, unbroken chain from the past, through the present, and into the future. It was a comforting thought, wasn't it? Knowing that even after death, your essence might contribute to the enduring life of something so magnificent and timeless. It certainly beats being stuck in a dusty photo album. This belief meant that certain trees, especially those of great age or unusual form, might be seen as particularly potent repositories of ancestral wisdom. A gnarled oak, ancient beyond reckoning, might be visited not just for its own inherent power, but specifically to commune with the spirits of the clan's founders, to seek their guidance, or simply to feel their comforting presence. You could almost imagine the whispers of old tales carried on the breeze through its leaves, stories of hunts and harvests, of loves and losses, all held within its silent, woody heart. Historians still argue whether the Celts believed the actual soul of a specific ancestor literally resided within a tree, or if it was more of a symbolic embodiment of their collective spirit and memory. Was it a literal inhabitation, or a metaphorical connection? The truth, as often happens with ancient beliefs, likely lies somewhere in the nuanced interpretation, a blend of literal and symbolic meaning that was perfectly clear to them but a bit fuzzy to us modern folks trying to categorize everything. Perhaps it was less about a single soul being trapped in bark, and more about the tree serving as an energetic anchor, a beacon for the lingering essence of those who had passed on. Consider the practice of burying the dead in proximity to significant trees or groves. This wasn't merely practical land use. It was a deliberate choice to intertwine the human cycle of life and death with the eternal cycle of the natural world. When you stood by such a tree, you weren't just standing by a plant. You were standing at a crossroads of time, a living memorial where the veil between worlds felt thinner. It was a place for remembrance, for quiet reflection, and for seeking counsel from those who had walked the path before you. You could almost hear the ancestral guidance, perhaps in the rustling of leaves, or the gentle creak of old branches, advising you not to wear white after Labor Day. This connection extended to the very act of planting trees. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit suggesting that some Celtic traditions involved planting a soul tree or birth tree for a newborn child. This tree would grow alongside the individual, its health and vitality mirroring their own. And upon death, the individual's spirit might return to that very tree, or a new tree might be planted to honor their passing, ensuring their continued presence within the living landscape. Imagine your entire life entwined with a single tree, a constant companion from your first breath to your last. It's a beautiful thought, a tangible representation of your life story, written in bark and leaf. So, when you consider the ancient Celts and their trees, you're not just looking at a people who appreciated nature. You're looking at a people who saw their very lineage, their history, their future, and the spirits of their loved ones deeply, fundamentally rooted in the earth and reaching towards the heavens through the enduring, silent majesty of the trees. They were the original family archives, the living memorials, and the whispering conduits to the wisdom of ages past. And in their silent, steadfast presence, the Celts found not just shelter and sustenance, but an enduring connection to everything that had come before them and everything that would follow. You've journeyed with us through the ancient mists, delving into the Celtic soul and its profound reverence for trees. But now, as the soft light of our story shifts, you might find yourself wondering, do these whispers of tree spirits and wisdom truly vanish with the setting sun of antiquity? Or do they, perhaps, linger, like the faint scent of wood smoke on a winter's eve, subtly woven into the fabric of our own modern world? Well, settle in, because the echoes are far more pervasive than you might first imagine. You see, even today, in our sleek, screen-dominated lives, a quiet hum of that ancient belief persists. It's not always overt, not like a druid standing solemnly beneath an oak, but rather a gentle current beneath the surface of our collective consciousness. Think about it. You walk through a bustling city park, and what do you instinctively seek out? The shade of a grand old tree, right? There's an undeniable comfort there, a sense of grounding that even the most advanced meditation app struggles to replicate. It's almost as if the tree itself is breathing a sigh of calm into your hurried day. Consider the traditions that bloom around us, traditions that, if you trace their roots, lead you back to surprisingly ancient soil. Take the humble Christmas tree, for instance. You deck it with lights and baubles, perhaps place a twinkling star on top, and it becomes the glowing heart of your winter festivities. But this isn't just a quaint Victorian invention. Oh no, this tradition of bringing evergreens indoors during the darkest days of winter, of decorating them to celebrate life's enduring spirit, whispers of pagan winter solstice rituals. Our ancestors, including the Celts, honored evergreens as symbols of life's persistence, of the sun's eventual return, a defiant splash of green against the stark white of winter. It's a mainstream historical fact that many of our modern holiday customs have roots in ancient pagan practices, subtly transmuted over centuries. You're not just celebrating Christmas. You're unknowingly participating in a very, very long-running botanical appreciation society. And what about the maypole? You might see it in quaint village fetes, ribbons flowing, children dancing around it in cheerful circles. It looks utterly innocent, a delightful piece of pastoral charm. But this towering pole, often crafted from a young tree, is a vibrant echo of ancient fertility rites, a phallic symbol reaching for the heavens, inviting life and abundance back to the land after winter's slumber. It's a communal celebration of spring's return, of nature's generative power, a direct descendant of the reverence ancient peoples held for trees as vital life-givers. So, next time you see a maypole, just remember, it's not just a pretty dance, it's a centuries-old spiritual celebration of, well, growth. And who doesn't love growth? Then there are the more subtle, almost unconscious beliefs that bubble up in our folklore and superstitions. You knock on wood for luck, don't you? When you tempt fate, you instinctively rap your knuckles against a wooden table or a door frame, or even your own head if you're feeling particularly desperate. This common gesture is a direct descendant of ancient beliefs that spirits resided within trees, and by touching their wood, you could invoke their protection or blessings, warding off misfortune. It's a quirky little tidbit, isn't it? A reflexive act that connects you to an animistic worldview without you even realizing it. It's like your subconscious is still living in a world where trees are your spiritual bodyguards. And what of the majestic, often gnarled trees you find in old graveyards? The yew, with its ancient, spreading branches, is a common sight. This isn't just about shade for quiet contemplation. The yew, as we discussed, was deeply associated with death, rebirth, and eternity by the Celts. Its presence in modern cemeteries is a direct, albeit often unacknowledged, continuation of that ancient symbolism, a silent testament to the belief that even in death, there is a connection to the enduring cycle of life. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That your final resting place might still be watched over by a tree that has seen millennia pass. Our reverence for trees also manifests profoundly in modern environmentalism. You witness passionate movements to protect ancient forests, to plant new trees, to fight deforestation. Why? Because we instinctively understand their vital role in our ecosystem, their beauty, their capacity to cleanse the air we breathe and provide habitats for countless creatures. But beneath the scientific understanding, there's often an almost spiritual appreciation. When you walk through an old-growth forest, you feel it, don't you? That sense of profound peace, of timelessness, of being in the presence of something truly grand. It's not just about carbon sequestration. It's about a deep, intuitive respect for these living monuments. Historians still argue whether this modern environmental reverence is a direct, unbroken line from ancient animism or a parallel evolution of human connection to nature, but the echoes are undeniable. You see the rise of forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, a practice originating in Japan but now embraced worldwide. It's not about swimming. It's about immersing yourself in the atmosphere of the forest, mindfully engaging your senses, and allowing the trees to soothe your soul. People report reduced stress, improved mood, and a deeper connection to the natural world. This isn't a New Age fad. It's a rediscovery of something ancient peoples knew instinctively. Trees are good for us, not just for oxygen, but for our very well-being. It's like the trees are offering a free, all-natural spa day, and all you have to do is show up. No reservations needed. Even in our language, the echoes persist. We speak of family trees, tracing our lineage through branches and roots. We talk about rooting for someone or having deep roots in a community. We describe someone as strong as an oak or flexible as a willow. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They are linguistic fossils, remnants of a time when the very structure of trees provided a framework for understanding human existence and connection. So, while you might not consciously believe that a specific oak tree holds the spirit of an ancient ancestor or offers direct divine wisdom, the feeling you get when you stand beneath its canopy, the comfort you derive from its presence, the instinct to protect it, these are all subtle, yet powerful reverberations of the ancient Celtic worldview. The belief that trees are more than just wood and leaves, that they possess a life force, a spirit, a wisdom that transcends our understanding, continues to shape our relationship with the natural world, even if we've traded the Druids' robes for Gore-Tex jackets. The ancient Celts saw the world as alive, interconnected, and trees were at its very heart. And in our quiet moments, when we truly listen, we can still hear those deep, resonant echoes. You've journeyed with us, haven't you? Through the mists of time, into the verdant heart of ancient Celtic lands, where the very air hummed with unseen life. And now, as the last embers of our tale glow softly, we arrive at the profound, enduring truth that underpins it all. The ancient Celts didn't just like trees. Oh no, my sleepy friend. They didn't just appreciate them for a bit of shade on a sunny day or a handy branch for hanging their laundry. Their connection, you see, was something far deeper, far more woven into the fabric of their very being than we, in our concrete jungles and digital screens, can often truly grasp. It was a reverence that whispered through the leaves, thrummed in the roots, and stood tall against the relentless march of time. Imagine, for a moment, living in a world where your survival, your very worldview, was inextricably linked to the towering sentinels of the forest. We talked about animism, didn't we? That foundational belief that spirits, life, and consciousness permeated everything. For the Celts, a tree wasn't just wood and leaves. It was a living, breathing entity with a spirit, a personality, and, perhaps most importantly, a wisdom born of centuries. It was a silent elder, a watchful guardian, a conduit to the divine. You didn't just take from a tree. You entered into a relationship with it, a reciprocal dance of respect and gratitude. It's a bit like having a very, very old, wise neighbor who also happens to provide all your building materials and medicine. You'd probably listen to them, wouldn't you? Especially if they had excellent advice on, say, avoiding Roman legions. Think back to the practical reliance we touched upon. Every aspect of their lives, from the warmth of their hearths to the weapons they wielded, from the homes that sheltered them to the very tools they used to shape their world, sprang from the forest. Their boats, their carts, their farming implements, all born of wood. Their medicine, their dyes, their food, often derived from tree bark, leaves, or berries. This wasn't just a transactional relationship, like popping to the local hardware store for a bag of planks. This was an intimate, daily dependence that fostered a profound sense of gratitude. When you carve a spoon from a fallen branch, knowing that tree might have stood for centuries, watching generations pass beneath its boughs, you can't help but feel a certain kinship. It's not just a spoon, it's a story, and probably a slightly lumpy one, if you're anything like me trying to whittle. Then there were the sacred groves, the nematons. These weren't just pretty parks where you'd go for a Sunday stroll and maybe Instagram a particularly photogenic oak. Oh no, these were hallowed sanctuaries, places where the veil between worlds felt thinner, where the divine presence was palpable. You entered them with reverence, your footsteps hushed, your spirit open. It was in these natural cathedrals, beneath the ancient boughs of forgotten giants, that the Celts connected with their gods, performed their rituals, and sought guidance. It reminds you that sometimes the most magnificent architecture isn't built by human hands, but grown by patience and sunlight. And frankly, a stone circle is far less likely to give you splinters. And who were the interpreters of this arboreal wisdom? The Druids, of course. These weren't just priests. They were scholars, judges, healers, and philosophers, intimately attuned to the rhythms of the natural world, especially the trees. They studied them, communed with them, and interpreted their whispers for the people. Imagine a university where the textbooks were actual trees, and your final exam was a conversation with an ancient oak. Sounds rather peaceful, doesn't it? Though I imagine attendance could be a bit branchy. Historians still debate the extent to which common folk directly engaged in tree worship versus Druids acting as intermediaries, but the reverence itself was undeniably pervasive. We spent time with specific trees, didn't we? The mighty oak, the king of the forest, embodying strength, wisdom, and the very essence of the divine. Its deep roots mirroring the underworld, its towering branches reaching for the heavens. The birch, with its silvery bark, whispering of new beginnings and purity, often used for protective charms. The ash, a cosmic pillar, a world tree connecting all realms, its wood prized for tools of power and healing. And the ancient yew, a silent sentinel of eternity, standing guard over burial sites, its immense lifespan linking it to death, rebirth, and the timeless cycle of existence. Each tree had its own unique spirit, its own lessons to impart, its own place in the grand tapestry of Celtic belief. It's almost like they had a favorite relative for every occasion. Oh, you need advice on a new job? Talk to the birch. Relationship troubles? The yew has seen things. The very language of the Celts, the Ogham alphabet, reflected this deep connection. Each letter, each sound, was associated with a specific tree. It wasn't just a way to write. It was a system imbued with meaning, used for divination, poetry, and secret communication. Imagine trying to explain that to someone today. Yes, I just spelled out my grocery list using the spiritual essence of a hazel, an apple, and a vine. It was quite enlightening. And then there's the beautiful, slightly poignant belief that trees served as living links to ancestors. Their ancient roots delving deep into the earth, connecting with those who had passed, their branches reaching skyward, perhaps holding the very memories and spirits of generations. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That your great-great-great-grandparents might be quietly observing the world through the rustling leaves of a familiar oak, offering silent encouragement or perhaps a gentle sigh if you're making questionable life choices. It certainly beats a dusty photo album for keeping family memories alive. This belief, while perhaps not universally documented in every single Celtic tribe, is a fascinating quirky tidbit that speaks to the profound spiritual connection they felt. It suggests a belief that the very essence of their forebears could literally reside within the ancient wood. This wasn't just quaint folklore. It was a deeply integrated worldview. The Celts lived in a world where the natural and the supernatural were not distinct categories. They were interwoven, a seamless tapestry of life, spirit, and wisdom. Their forests were not just resources. They were companions, teachers, and sacred spaces. And while the specifics of their beliefs may have varied across the myriad Celtic tribes, from the Gauls to the Britons, the Irish to the Picts, the core reverence for trees remained a defining characteristic. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that the Roman expansion into Celtic lands, particularly in Gaul and Britain, led to significant deforestation for timber, agriculture, and military purposes. This destruction of their sacred groves and vital resources would have been not just a practical blow, but a profound spiritual assault on the Celtic way of life, highlighting just how central these trees were to their identity. So, as we drift towards the quiet close of our story, what can we take from this enduring connection? Perhaps it's a gentle reminder that there's wisdom to be found beyond our screens and concrete walls, that nature isn't just something out there to be observed, but something in here to be experienced. The ancient Celts, through their profound reverence for trees, offer us a glimpse into a world where humanity was deeply, intrinsically connected to the natural world, where every rustle of leaves truly did whisper of presence, and every ancient trunk held secrets worth listening to. Their legacy isn't just in the ruins they left behind, but in the enduring spirit of connection, a testament to a time when the roots of humanity were deeply intertwined with the roots of the earth itself.